As the sun cast its golden hues over the quaint station platform of Riverbrook, a scene unfolded that would leave an indelible mark on all who witnessed it. There stood Amara Wilson, her heart pounding with the rhythm of 1,000 drums, her dreams of a new life teetering on the edge of a precipice. She had journeyed far, her spirit buoyed by letters that promised love and acceptance, only to be met with the chilling gaze of Harold Pierce, whose face drained of color as if he had encountered a specter in the daylight. "This isn't going to work," Harold's voice trembled, barely audible over the clatter of the arriving train. "You didn't mention that you were black." Amara's heart sank into an abyss of disappointment as she completed the sentence Harold couldn't bear to utter. Her carefully chosen hat meant to grace this moment of reunion now seemed nothing more than a cruel jest in the face of such rejection. 3 weeks on the rails, 6 months of fervent correspondence, a trunk brimming with hopes and the dream of escaping the oppressive shadows of urban discrimination, all shattered in the blink of an eye when Harold finally laid his eyes upon her. "In your letters you wrote so well, I imagined—" Harold stammered, retreating a step, the bouquet in his hand wilting under the weight of his prejudice. "Couldn't you have warned me?" Amara inhaled deeply, summoning every fragment of dignity she could muster. "Tell you what exactly," she retorted, her voice steady despite the storm within. "That my skin is as dark as the night, but my feelings are as real as yours. You never asked." Harold glanced around, the eyes of passers-by and station staff now fixed upon this unexpected tableau. In Riverbrook, a town where conformity was the unspoken rule, a well-dressed black woman was already a spectacle. Now witnessing her public rejection by a white man, the scene was irresistible to the town's voyeurs. "You have to understand my position," Harold muttered, his voice a mix of plea and justification. "The community here, my business." He took another step back, offering a return ticket as if it could erase the sting of his words. "You seem educated. I'm sure you'll understand." A chill ran down Amara's spine, not from sorrow, but from a seething, controlled anger that pulsed beneath her calm exterior. Here in this moment, the illusion of acceptance was stripped away, revealing the harsh truth of societal divides. In his letters, Harold had poured out the solitary soul of a 45-year-old widower, yearning for companionship, empathy, and a fresh start at love. Never once did he hint at any prejudice in his heart. "I've emptied my savings just to make this journey," she confessed, her voice unwavering despite the tremors within. "There's no turning back for me." Harold, with a compassionate gesture, delved into his pocket, extracting a handful of crumpled bills. "This should suffice for a temporary refuge while you sort out your next steps." But then a deep voice sliced through the tension like lightning on a serene day. "Is that your answer, Pierce?" Tossing money at the issue, hoping it vanishes like it always does. A formidable figure emerged behind Harold, his eyes piercing through the merchant, who seemed to diminish under his gaze. Clad in attire that whispered of understated wealth, this man's sun-kissed skin spoke of days under the open sky, yet his stance radiated undeniable command. "This is none of your affair," Harold retorted, his voice quivering with doubt. "It becomes my affair when I see a man I've known for 15 years acting like a coward," the man now identified as Alexander Maxwell declared. Turning to Amara, his expression softened. "Miss, may I introduce myself, Alexander Maxwell. I own a property just outside the city." Amara responded with a cautious nod, her experience teaching her that kindness from strangers often bore a hidden cost. "If I may be so bold," Alexander continued, "I offer you shelter in my home until you decide your path forward. Our guest rooms are seldom occupied, and my housekeeper would welcome the company." Harold, visibly taken aback, could only watch as the scene unfolded before him. "Upon the offer, Maxwell, you must be jesting. What will the townsfolk murmur?" Alexander's lips curved into a smile as chilling as the winter winds, his eyes void of any warmth. "The very same people who conduct their daily business with me," he mused aloud. "The ones whose livelihoods are entwined with the soil of my land, what might they utter?" Harold paled, the weight of the unspoken words pressing down upon him like a stone. Alexander Maxwell was not merely a farmer. He was the lord of half the region's fertile earth. Yet what none at the station could possibly fathom was that Amara, caught between the sting of rejection and the harsh whisper of necessity, carried more than just her worldly possessions in that trunk. Hidden within her was a secret potent enough to shift the very foundations of power in their quaint community. A secret that would leave Harold Pierce gnashing his teeth in regret for the day he let prejudice blind his judgment. The Maxwell estate was no simple farm, as its owner had so humbly suggested. It was a grand Victorian mansion, its elegance unmatched, surrounded by fields of flourishing crops and pastures where majestic horses grazed under the gentle caress of the sun. As Alexander's carriage rolled through the ornate gates, Amara was both awestruck and wary. "People here aren't accustomed to the unfamiliar," Alexander noted, gesturing towards the manor house. Riverbrook was built by families steeped in tradition, comfortably ensconced in yesteryear. Harold Pierce merely a symptom of a malaise that runs deep. The housekeeper, Mrs. Foster, a woman whose eyes spoke of kindness, yet whose posture was as rigid as the mansion's columns, greeted Amar with a formality that bordered on warmth. If she harbored any shock at the arrival of a black guest, she kept it well concealed beneath her professional veneer. As Amara stepped through the opulent corridors adorned with timeless art and relics, her host's voice resonated with warmth. "I've prepared the blue room, the one that boasts the finest garden view." The grandeur of the evening's dinner setting in the stately dining room only amplified the anticipation of the stories to be shared. Here Alexander began to unfold the tapestry of his life. Born to a northern banker and a passionate abolitionist teacher, he inherited not merely wealth but also a profound commitment to equality. Moving to Riverbrook 15 years prior, he was seen as an enigma, too affluent to be shunned, yet too unconventional to be fully embraced. "And what of your story, Miss Wilson?" Alexander inquired. His curiosity piqued after recounting his own business ventures. "Your letters must have truly impressed Harold for him to extend such a formal invitation." Amara paused, the weight of her past momentarily heavy on her shoulders, yet something in Alexander's forthright gaze urged her to speak. "I was a teacher in Boston," she began, her voice steadying. "I taught literature and history to young women of color. But when the school closed for want of funds, I knew I had to seek a fresh beginning." What she left unsaid was the true impetus for her correspondence. The unexpected bequest from her grandfather, a lifelong butler to a prominent family, had not only included gold coins meticulously saved over decades, but also ancient documents. Documents potent enough to alter destinies in Riverbrook. These she had concealed within the secret compartment of her trunk. In the days that followed, Alexander provided Amar with a sanctuary for reflection. The mansion's library, a veritable cornucopia of knowledge, became her refuge. She delved into tomes on local history, geography, and the intricate laws of the region. When queried about her reading choices, she would simply smile, her eyes alight with curiosity. "I am merely broadening my horizons." Barely a week had passed since her arrival, yet whispers of her presence had already woven themselves through the very fabric of the small town. The Maxwell mansion, once a quiet retreat, now buzzed with unexpected visitors. It was as if everyone from the curious neighbors to the merchants' wives and even the local reverend had suddenly remembered urgent business with Alexander. "Just look at that," Alexander murmured, his voice tinged with irony, during afternoon tea following a particularly transparent delegation's departure. "You've become the local spectacle without even stepping into town." Amara's response was a bitter smile. "I've always been a spectacle, Mr. Maxwell. The only difference now is the porcelain teacup in my hand as I'm observed." It was during one of these awkward social calls that Harold Pierce finally mustered the nerve to appear. He arrived unannounced, hat clutched nervously in his hand, his face a study in feigned concern. "Maxwell," he greeted, his voice trembling slightly. "I've just come to see if Miss Wilson is comfortable." Alexander's reply was as dry as the desert. "Absolutely delighted. Why don't you ask her yourself?" Harold's face paled as Amara glided into the room. She was no longer the weary, humiliated figure from the train station, but a woman of grace and purpose, adorned in one of the elegant dresses Mrs. Foster had tailored for her. "Mr. Pierce," she greeted him, her tone as cold as the winter wind. What an unexpected surprise. Fumbling with his hat, Harold stuttered, "I came, that is, the community is concerned about your well-being. How kind of them to think of your situation." He glanced nervously at Alexander. "It's not proper for an unmarried woman to reside in the home of an unmarried man, especially when she's black." Alexander interjected, his voice dangerously soft. "Go on, Pierce. I'm eager to hear how you plan to conclude that thought." Harold swallowed his Adam's apple, bobbing visibly. "The church committee is considering options to assist her return to Boston. A collection is being organized." Amara's smile was sharp, a gleam of defiance in her eyes, a silent testament to her resilience in the face of adversity. Harold's eyes widened in disbelief, his voice a mix of incredulity and scorn. "You can't possibly intend to stay here indefinitely. You don't know anyone, you have no family, no job." Amara, with a serene smile, cut through his protests, her voice calm, yet resolute. "Actually, I do have a job. Mr. Maxwell has graciously offered me the position of librarian on his estate. It seems the Maxwells have been collecting books for generations without ever properly organizing them." Harold's gaze shifted to Alexander, his expression a blend of shock and barely concealed fury. "You can't be serious?" He spat out his words laced with disbelief. Alexander, ever the picture of nonchalance, merely shrugged. "I've never been more serious. Miss Wilson is educated and capable. My library has never been in better hands." What Harold failed to grasp as he stumbled through his increasingly feeble objections was the profound significance of that job. The Maxwell Library was not just a repository of literary classics. It was a treasure trove of land records, legal documents, and the complete chronicle of the region, including secrets some families would pay dearly to keep hidden. As Harold departed, his defeat palpable in the air, Alexander watched him through the window, his figure a blur of frustration crossing the garden. "He'll make your life difficult," he mused aloud, his voice tinged with concern. "The slight you've dealt to his pride today will not be easily forgiven." Amara's eyes sparkled with newfound resolve as she nodded. "Let him try. While he's busy weaving petty rumors, I'll delve far deeper than he could ever anticipate." What Harold Pierce, what all of Riverbrook could not fathom, was the meticulous purpose behind Amar's hours in the library. Amidst yellowing documents and dust-laden records, she was assembling the pieces of a puzzle that would unearth an unsettling truth. Riverbrook's founding families, including the Pierces, had amassed their wealth on land that was not rightfully theirs. And while the local society buzzed with idle gossip, Amara was on the cusp of revealing a narrative that could shake the very foundations of their community. 2 weeks had passed since Amara's subtle preparations began setting the stage for a revelation that would ripple through the very soul of the community. The modest hall of Riverbrook's town hall was brimming, its wall barely containing the crowd. An urgent summons had drawn together the founding families, local traders, and farmers from far and wide. Amidst the uproar, Harold Pierce was a spectacle of agitation, his face flushed with fury as he exclaimed, "It's an outrage. Maxwell is flagrantly disregarding our traditions by harboring that woman on his estate. Whispers of scandalous conduct are troubling our good families." As murmurs of consent spread like wildfire through the assembly, the doors burst open with a commanding presence. Alexander Maxwell strode in his calm demeanor, a stark contrast to the room's tension, followed by Amara Wilson, her step regal and unflinching. A heavy silence blanketed the hall as Alexander's voice, resonant and clear, cut through the quiet. "I am grateful for the invitation, though I must clarify a misconception. Miss Wilson is not merely my guest. She stands here as the legal representative for a matter that touches each of you deeply." Harold's nervous chuckle shattered the silence. "Legal representative, a woman of color, uneducated, and without authority. Maxwell, have you lost all sense?" Amara, with deliberate grace, opened her briefcase. "Actually, Mr. Pierce," she began, her voice steady, "in addition to my qualifications as an accredited teacher, I hold legal power of attorney as a direct descendant of Joseph Freeman. The name echoed like thunder in the hushed hall, draining color from the older attendees' faces. Joseph Freeman doesn't exist, Harold retorted, his voice quivering with unease. Curious, Amar responded, her tone laced with irony, as she produced aged yellow documents. Because here I have the original deed signed by the governor in 1866, which granted Joseph Freeman, my great-grandfather, a man liberated post-Civil War, the land that now forms roughly 60% of Riverbrook, including Mr. Pierce, your very store. Judge Thornton, adjusting his spectacles, peered closer, the weight of history palpable in the air. Harold's eyes narrowed behind his spectacles as he scrutinized the documents Amar had just laid before him. This, this looks authentic, he muttered, his voice a mix of disbelief and recognition. It's a forgery, he shouted suddenly, yet his voice wavered, betraying a hint of doubt. Unfazed, Amara continued, her voice steady. The supporting records are here. They detail how Joseph Freeman was forced to flee after the attempted lynchings in 1870, and how the founding families carved up his land, establishing what they named the Riverbrook Property Committee. Alexander, his voice rich with intrigue, chimed in. The Maxwell Library holds copies of all land records in this region. Isn't it curious how the specific records from 1870 to 1872 were missing until Miss Wilson unearthed cross-references in other documents? Reverend Miller, an elderly figure, bowed his head in solemn acknowledgement. My father spoke of this tale. He said it was a sin buried deep. We're not here to punish the descendants for the sins of their ancestors. Amara declared, her tone both passionate and resolute. I propose a deal, a foundation for the community to benefit all of Riverbrook, focusing on education and affordable housing. Harold Pierce let out a nervous laugh. That's absurd. No one will believe this charade. At that moment, Attorney Jeff, a lawyer respected across 3 states, entered the hall. His presence commanded immediate attention. The documents have been verified by the State Historical Records Commission. He announced, his voice carrying the weight of authority. They are authentic, and I am pleased to inform you that the lawsuit has been formally filed. The hall erupted into a cacophony of raised voices. Amid the uproar, Harold lunged toward Amara, his face contorted with fury. You planned this from the start, didn't you? He hissed. That's what you were hiding in those letters. Amara, her composure unyielding, replied, No, Mr. Pierce. In those letters, I was merely a lonely woman seeking companionship. It was your immediate rejection of me upon seeing me that revealed your true colors. The kind of man who would judge my great-grandfather for the same reason you judge me, solely because of the color of our skin. His voice trembled, barely a whisper, as he muttered, You're going to ruin us. The pallor of his skin spoke volumes of his dread. But Amara, with a gentle resolve, responded, No, I intend to right a historical wrong in the fairest manner possible for everyone's sake. She paused, her eyes reflecting the depth of her conviction. The difference between us, Mr. Pierce, is that I've lived under the shadow of discrimination my entire life, yet I harbor no desire to see anyone lose their home, not even you. Harold Pierce, defeated, sank into a chair as the city council members withdrew to contemplate Amar's proposal. Alexander, with admiration shimmering in his eyes, approached her. You could have demanded everything, he whispered, his voice full of awe, and in doing so make myself no different from those who wronged my great-grandfather. Amara countered, her voice steady with purpose. Justice isn't revenge, Alexander, it's restoration. What none in that room could foresee as they watched the woman they had underestimated was that Riverbrook's true metamorphosis was just beginning. The legacy that would reverberate through the halls of power for generations wouldn't be of a destroyer, but of a woman who, despite her wounds, chose to rebuild with dignity and foresight. While Harold Pierce faced the crumbling of his reputation, Amara Wilson and Alexander Maxwell shared a glance. A silent vow of a future where belonging transcended the color of one's skin, focusing instead on the content of character. 6 months after that pivotal meeting at City Hall, Riverbrook was reborn. The Freeman Foundation, born from the restitution of historical injustices, was now empowering the community, through scholarships for underprivileged youth and revitalization projects. At the heart of this transformation stood Amara, not as a figure of vengeance, but as a visionary who looked beyond her personal pain. The space once occupied by Harold Pierce's store had been repurposed into Riverbrook's first public library, a sanctuary where forgotten narratives could now be voiced. Harold, meanwhile, had quietly left town weeks ago, his legacy as a symbol of the past now overshadowed by the new dawn Amara had ushered in. After the shattering revelation, he sold his properties for a pittance, vanishing into the ether without a whisper of farewell. Whispers swirled through the town, suggesting he had taken up a humble position as a clerk in a neighboring town. His pride had crumbled alongside his bank account. "You could have utterly crushed him," Alexander remarked, his voice tinged with awe as they meandered through the gardens of her estate, now a vibrant cultural hub. Most would have bled him dry for every last cent. Amara's smile was serene as she watched children frolicking on lawns that once whispered secrets only to the elite. "Revenge would have satiated me for a fleeting moment," she mused, her gesture sweeping over the transformed space. "But this will nourish our souls for generations to come." The tale of Freeman Heiress had transcended Riverbrook, drawing scholars and journalists eager to chronicle similar historical injustices. Invitations poured in for Amara to speak at universities to share not just her tale, but the meticulous legal framework she had woven to reclaim the truth. At a celebratory dinner in the grand hall of what was now officially the Freeman Maxwell House, after the quiet union of its owners, Judge Thornton stood, his voice thick with emotion. "To the woman who showed us that justice isn't merely a legal concept, but a daily practice," he declared, his eyes glistening with genuine respect. "When Amara came to our town, we thought we knew her from her appearance alone. What a profound lesson we were taught." Beside him, Martha Webb, now leading the new community school, nodded in agreement. "And to think it all began with a harsh rejection at the train station." Alexander, taking Amara's hand, whispered with a tender smile, "The best decision Harold Pierce ever made was to reject you." Although he doubted, in the heart of the old Central Square, where once only traditional families were honored, stood a humble testament to change. Not a towering statue, but a modest bronze plaque etched with the peon of Joseph Freeman. His land, once unjustly seized, had now been restored to its rightful purpose, serving the entire community with dignity and respect. As twilight draped over Riverbrook, Amara gazed upon the city lights from her new porch, a symbol of her transformation. She had entered this town as an outcast, a black woman deemed unworthy of belonging. Yet here she stood, not merely accepted, but revered, not for conforming to others' expectations, but for her unwavering commitment to her principles. When Alexander approached with 2 steaming cups of tea, Amar's thoughts lingered on the journey that had led them to this moment. "You know what's ironic?" she mused aloud. "Harold rejected me because he couldn't fathom sharing his life with someone who didn't fit into his narrow worldview. Yet that very rejection led to his downfall." Alexander nodded, adding, "And it was your strength, your history, your truth, everything he despised that allowed you to flourish." The lesson that Riverbrook absorbed, a truth that would resonate through the generations, was both simple and profound. When we judge others based on mere appearances, we not only strip them of their humanity, but also blind ourselves to the remarkable contributions they could offer to our lives. As Amara Wilson Maxwell watched the moon ascend over the city that had once shunned her, she realized that true revenge was never about retribution against Harold Pierce. It was about crafting something so magnificent, so just and enduring, that his rejection would merely be a footnote in the grand narrative now unfolding. What greater victory could there be than this, a story of overcoming prejudice, of justice, served with grace and dignity, echoing through time, reminding us of the power of resilience and the beauty of inclusivity. In the tapestry of our existence, differences aren't barriers. They are vibrant threads weaving strength into communities. Peace. Thank you for joining us on this journey. Your thoughts, comments, likes, shares, and subscriptions mean the world to us. Let's keep the conversation going. Comment below, let us know your thoughts, and help spread the message of unity and strength. Together we can make a difference.